Um, yeah, I was looking at the mood board and under the themes channel, I guess, column, at the very bottom, you have new themes. And I was reading through them and I ran across the 18% gray area. And I am really curious as to what that might be or represent, or where does this theme come from? Or what were you pulling from it to have it show up as an idea?
Think that might have been my fault. Well, Marcella and I are pun masters, and I'm just gonna guess that it was me because that's one of my things that I think about all the time, which is that 18% gray, right, is this Kodak derived tone. It's what's known as middle gray, so it's the zone that's exactly between black and white. It has all these other has all these other functions, right? It's the perfect shade to calibrate a camera, right? If you focus on a surface that's 18% gray, which is, let's not dive all the way into the matrix yet. It will calibrate your camera so that your film will be exposed as though you are looking in natural light, right? Is that kind of where you're coming from, Jasmine? No.
I think that, yeah, I think
Sure.
that's what you were referring to on the board, Tay.
Yeah. So it's like middle gray, right? It's
Yeah.
called middle gray. But in the vast matrix of this thing, right? There's this sort of I don't know how to say what I think it is, but there's a kind of implicit white-centric view towards all technology, even though much of the technology that we enjoy was not invented by whites. And photography really bears that from its inception. So I studied photography for 6 years. The earliest use of photographic emulsions were not sensitive to red light just because of their nature, right? No one had developed this chemistry until the mid 1920s to really fully capture the spectrum of color. Whether or not that bore intent, the earliest use of photographs in the Northeast, where I'm from, Connecticut, was actually the primary supplier of photographic supplies in the country for a good 35 years. The primary effects of photography in its colonial use was to provide visual proof that indigenous peoples were darker skinned and therefore in some way inferior, because their inability to reflect brighter shades of the color spectrum made them look darker and ruddier. And so in this kind of like weird thing, this middle is actually a way of technologically talking about white centricism. So that's maybe a lot of conspiracy, but it's also like, I know that I'm right. So then there's this other thing where in the world of video projection, there's this neutral gray that you want in order to project something that's bright or something that's dark. And that also falls into this world of 18% gray, this middle gray color. The best projection surfaces are this sort of like actually quite ugly color. Like if you were to look at it, you're like, this is, I can't even find something it's just not an awesome color, but it reflects everything on either side of it perfectly. And so there's this universe of like these kind of flat sort of like holodeck colored grays that we were talking about, where it's just like everything looks like a model from like a kind of 1980s CGI template or something. So this is kind of shorthand for these things. Sorry, all that to say that.
Can I share a connection that I just made off of what you said? So the 18% gray completely followed exactly what you said. I understand that that's like the best middle ground for both ends. And the word that came up to me in finding like a word for that 18% was the word hidden. And then that took me to another part of your board that was talking about reparations. And so making that connection of the questions on the board about how do you give reparations if you're not actually supporting the cause behind it, and those types of things. And so I think about other places in North Carolina like Asheville who have gone through reparations and giving reparations, and then hearing trickling down of in our area of the floating the ideas, but what does that look like? And it feels like everyone's trying to fit into this hidden 18% gray area, to say that they can go there, but it's still hidden, which to me also relates to going back to technology, crowdsourcing, when Kickstarter came out and GoFundMe came out, and it was a platform to make it equitable to everybody to be able to fundraise. But then even inside of that, it turned into this 18% gray area of those who monopolized on that and then took space away from other groups who might have needed it more. So I found all these connections with just that 18% gray area, if that helps your process.
Well, this is awesome. I mean, I think you're hitting the idea, which is like, you know, these are just seeds for this kind of conversation.